Do not let her leave this branch until we verify every dollar," the bank manager said loudly enough for the entire lobby to hear, his finger aimed directly at the black mother standing at the customer service counter. Conversation stopped almost instantly. A man waiting to deposit a paycheck lowered his phone. An elderly couple exchanged uneasy glances. A little girl sitting beside her father looked up without understanding why every adult had suddenly become so quiet. The mother remained still, one hand resting gently on the shoulder of her 12-year-old son, who tightened his grip on the folder containing paperwork for the college savings account they had spent years building one small deposit at a time. She looked directly at the manager without raising her voice. "There must be a mistake," she said calmly. Her steady tone only seemed to frustrate him more. "The system flagged your account," he replied. "Until we finish our investigation, you are not leaving." Every pair of eyes in the branch shifted toward her. She could almost feel the weight of strangers trying to decide whether the accusation fit the woman standing before them. She wore inexpensive clothes from a long workday, comfortable shoes that had clearly seen countless shifts, and carried no trace of the polished image many people expected from someone managing a growing education fund. None of that changed the quiet dignity in her expression, yet she recognized the familiar look in the manager's eyes. He had already reached a conclusion before asking a single meaningful question. Her son glanced up at her, searching her face for reassurance instead of answers. She gently squeezed his shoulder, silently promising that everything would be all right, even though she could not know whether that promise would survive the next few minutes. Behind the counter, two employees exchanged uncertain looks but continued typing, unwilling to interrupt their supervisor. A uniformed security officer near the entrance straightened his posture after hearing the manager's raised voice, watching carefully for instructions that had not yet come. The manager reached for a thick customer file lying beside his computer, placing it on the counter with unnecessary confidence. "Fraud investigations are not optional," he said, making sure everyone nearby could hear every word. "If everything is legitimate, you have nothing to worry about." The sentence sounded reasonable on the surface, yet the tone beneath it carried something colder, something that suggested he had already decided who she was before opening a single page. The mother slowly placed her driver's license, debit card, and supporting documents on the counter without rushing or arguing. She refused to let fear control her actions because she understood that panic would only confirm assumptions already forming in the minds around her. Her son stood quietly beside her, clutching the folder that represented years of sacrifice, birthday money saved instead of spent, overtime shifts accepted without complaint, and countless evenings when his mother skipped small comforts so his future could remain protected. Neither of them noticed the young bank employee several stations away staring at the file resting beneath the manager's hand with growing uncertainty, her eyes lingering on a customer identification number that somehow did not seem to match the woman now standing in front of the counter. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then hesitated while the manager flipped the cover open with complete confidence, convinced that the next few pages would prove he had been right all along. The young employee could not stop looking at the identification number printed across the top corner of the file resting beneath the manager's hand. Something about it felt wrong, but she had only been with the bank for 8 months, and interrupting the branch manager during what appeared to be a serious fraud investigation was not a decision she felt confident making. She quietly compared the account number displayed on her computer screen with the one visible inside the folder from several feet away, then looked back toward the woman standing calmly beside her son. Nothing seemed to fit together, yet she remained silent, hoping someone with more authority would notice before the situation went any further. The mother continued standing with remarkable composure. She had learned long ago that remaining calm often required more strength than raising her voice. Years earlier, after becoming a single parent, she had discovered that every unexpected obstacle demanded patience before emotion. She worked full-time as a certified nursing assistant during the day and cleaned medical offices several evenings each week. Every extra shift meant another small deposit into the education account she had opened for her son when he was still in elementary school. She rarely purchased anything for herself beyond what was absolutely necessary. New clothes could wait. Vacations could wait. Even replacing her aging sedan had waited because every dollar saved represented another opportunity for her son to dream bigger than she ever had. Her son understood more than most children his age. He knew why birthdays were simple, why restaurant dinners were rare, and why his mother always smiled whenever she transferred even a small amount into his college savings account. She never described those sacrifices as burdens. Instead, she called them investments in tomorrow. Standing beside her inside the bank, he watched adults whisper while pretending not to stare. He noticed how people who had smiled politely only minutes earlier now stepped slightly farther away, creating invisible space between themselves and his mother. He did not fully understand banking procedures, but he understood embarrassment, and he hated seeing strangers look at the person he admired most as though she had done something wrong. The manager appeared completely convinced that his actions were justified. Years of handling financial disputes had strengthened his confidence in following procedures without hesitation. He believed that immediate action protected the bank, its customers, and its reputation. Somewhere along the way, however, confidence had quietly become certainty, and certainty had left very little room for listening. When he looked across the counter, he no longer saw a mother protecting her child's future. He saw someone who matched an assumption already forming in his mind before the conversation had even begun. Several customers continued pretending to focus on their own transactions while secretly following every word. An elderly veteran waiting to cash a check frowned slightly, uncomfortable with how quickly conclusions had been announced before any explanation had been offered. A young business owner glanced toward the security officer, wondering whether the situation truly required such public attention. Even the security officer himself remained motionless, sensing that nothing about the woman's behavior suggested panic, aggression, or dishonesty. She had answered every request respectfully, provided every document immediately, and maintained steady eye contact despite becoming the center of unwanted attention. The young employee finally took a slow breath and carefully walked toward another workstation where a senior colleague was reviewing loan applications. Without drawing attention, she quietly pointed toward the account number displayed on her monitor. The older employee studied it for several seconds before narrowing her eyes. She looked toward the folder on the manager's desk, then back at the screen. A faint expression of concern crossed her face. Neither woman spoke. They both understood that interrupting the manager without absolute certainty could create another problem entirely. Meanwhile, the mother gently brushed a loose strand of hair away from her son's forehead and offered him a reassuring smile that did not quite reach her own tired eyes. She had entered the branch expecting to finalize paperwork that would bring her son one step closer to college. Instead, she found herself standing before an audience that had already begun writing a story about her without knowing a single chapter of her life. While only a few feet away, the unopened pages inside one ordinary file quietly held the truth that would soon change everything. The branch manager slowly turned the first page inside the file with the confidence of someone who believed the outcome had already been decided before the review even began. Every movement reflected years of experience, years of trusting reports, alerts, and internal procedures without hesitation. He had built a reputation for acting quickly whenever the bank's monitoring system identified unusual financial activity. Colleagues often praised his decisiveness, and regional supervisors appreciated that he never ignored potential risks. Those compliments had gradually shaped a habit that was almost invisible to him. He had stopped treating every investigation as a question and had begun treating many of them as confirmations of what he already expected to find. The woman standing before him fit an image that his subconscious accepted far too easily, and he never paused to examine why. The lobby remained unusually quiet as customers watched the review continue. The sound of keyboards slowed. The steady hum of the air conditioning became strangely noticeable. Even the soft music playing through the ceiling speakers seemed distant compared with the silence surrounding the customer service counter. The manager carefully examined the first document, then another, occasionally glancing toward his computer monitor before returning to the paperwork. His expression remained serious, but the certainty that had defined him only moments earlier became almost impossible to read. He expected the information on the pages to align perfectly with the alert displayed on his screen, yet something felt less straightforward than he anticipated. Across the counter, the mother waited without interrupting him. She understood that defending herself too aggressively would likely be interpreted as guilt, while remaining calm required extraordinary patience under circumstances that would have shaken almost anyone. Her son stood beside her with both hands wrapped around the worn folder they had carried into the branch together. Inside were scholarship applications, saving statements, and college planning documents they had organized the night before around the kitchen table. He remembered how excited his mother had been before leaving home that morning. She had smiled while telling him that every responsible decision they had made for years was finally bringing them closer to his future. That hopeful conversation now felt impossibly far away. The young employee continued studying the account information displayed on her monitor. Her concern had only grown stronger with each passing minute. Quietly opening another internal database, she compared the customer identification number connected to the alert with the identification number attached to the mother's account. They were different, not similar, entirely different. She looked again toward the folder resting beneath the manager's hand and felt a knot forming in her stomach. She wanted to speak immediately, yet years of workplace hierarchy reminded her that challenging a supervisor in front of customers carried consequences of its own. She caught the eye of the experienced employee standing nearby and subtly pointed toward the two account numbers again. This time the senior employee's expression changed completely. Instead of uncertainty, she saw unmistakable concern. The manager turned another page, still unaware that two members of his own staff were beginning to recognize a detail he had overlooked. He remained focused on proving the alert rather than confirming the identity connected to it. His confidence narrowed his attention until the evidence supporting his expectation appeared more important than the information contradicting it. Several customers who had quietly observed the situation from nearby chairs started exchanging uncertain glances. The longer the review continued without any clear evidence, the more uncomfortable the public accusation began to feel. The elderly veteran slowly removed his glasses and folded them in his hands, watching the mother's calm composure with growing respect. A young couple waiting to open their first joint checking account whispered softly to each other, wondering whether they would have remained as composed under the same circumstances. The security officer remained at his post, no longer watching the mother but watching the manager instead, sensing that the atmosphere had shifted in a way he could not yet explain. Then, as the manager reached for another page inside the folder, his fingers briefly paused over a customer profile sheet that displayed a photograph. His eyes moved from the photograph to the woman standing before him, then back to the page once more. For the first time since the confrontation began, a faint trace of uncertainty crossed his face. While only a few feet away, the young employee quietly stepped forward, knowing that another second of silence might allow an honest mistake to become something far more difficult to undo. The young employee finally gathered enough courage to step closer to the customer service counter, careful not to interrupt too abruptly, but unable to ignore what she had discovered any longer. "Sir," she said quietly, hoping only the manager would hear her. He did not look up immediately. His attention remained fixed on the open folder before him. "One moment," he replied without lifting his eyes from the paperwork. She hesitated, then glanced toward the senior employee, who gave a small, encouraging nod. Taking another careful breath, she spoke again, this time with enough confidence that the words reached him despite the silence filling the lobby. "Sir, I think the customer identification numbers might not match." The manager finally looked up, his expression reflecting mild irritation more than concern. "I know exactly what I am reviewing," he answered, his voice controlled but firm. "Please return to your station." The young employee lowered her eyes for a moment, embarrassed by the public dismissal, yet the numbers she had seen continued repeating in her mind. She quietly remained where she was instead of walking away. The senior employee now stepped forward as well, speaking with the calm confidence that came from more than 20 years of banking experience. "It may be worth verifying the identification number before continuing," she said respectfully. "The account displayed on the alert appears different from the account connected to the customer standing here." The words settled over the lobby with surprising weight. For the first time since the confrontation had begun, the manager stopped turning pages. His fingers rested motionless on the file, while he slowly shifted his attention from the open documents to the computer monitor beside him. The mother remained silent. She had no desire to celebrate a possibility that had not yet become reality. She simply watched as the certainty that had driven every decision during the past several minutes began meeting something stronger than confidence: evidence. Her son looked from one employee to another without fully understanding what had changed, but he sensed that the atmosphere had become different. The fear that had quietly settled over the lobby was slowly giving way to uncertainty. Customers who had been pretending not to watch openly followed every movement now. Even those standing near the teller windows paused their own transactions, sensing that something important was unfolding. The manager entered the account number displayed in the electronic alert once more, this time deliberately comparing each digit against the customer profile inside the physical folder. His forehead tightened almost immediately. He looked back at the photograph attached to the file, then toward the woman standing across the counter. The face printed on the profile belonged to someone else entirely. Different age, different address, different account history. He quickly examined another page. The account owner listed there did not share the same last name, date of birth, or customer identification number as the woman standing before him. His breathing slowed. Without speaking, he reopened the electronic alert and carefully read information he had previously skimmed over while believing the conclusion was already obvious. Every line now pointed toward the same uncomfortable truth. The file resting beneath his hand had never belonged to the mother waiting quietly before him. It belonged to another customer whose investigation remained entirely unrelated. The senior employee said nothing. She simply watched him reach the realization on his own. The young employee remained still, relieved that she had spoken before the mistake became even more damaging. The security officer relaxed his posture almost instinctively, recognizing that whatever danger had supposedly existed moments earlier had quietly disappeared. The mother never smiled. She never folded her arms in satisfaction or demanded an explanation. She simply waited with the same dignity she had carried from the moment she first approached the counter, allowing the truth to emerge without anger. Her son looked up at her, searching her face once again. This time he saw something different. She was still hurt by everything that had happened, but she had never allowed humiliation to define who she was. Across the counter, the manager slowly closed the folder and stared at the cover in complete silence. The confidence that had filled the lobby only minutes earlier had vanished, replaced by the unmistakable realization that he had publicly accused an innocent mother while holding the wrong file in his own hands. The silence inside the branch lasted several long seconds after the manager closed the folder. No one rushed to fill the empty space with explanations because everyone present understood that words spoken too quickly could not erase what had already happened. The customers who had quietly watched the confrontation now looked at the mother with entirely different expressions. The suspicion that had filled the room only moments earlier had been replaced by discomfort, not because the facts had changed, but because the truth had finally caught up with assumptions that should never have been made in the first place. The manager slowly looked from the folder to his computer screen and then back toward the woman standing patiently across the counter. For the first time that morning, he noticed details he had ignored before. He saw the neatly organized documents she had carefully placed on the counter. He noticed the college savings paperwork waiting beneath her identification card. He noticed the quiet confidence with which she had answered every question without raising her voice or becoming defensive. None of those details fit the story he had imagined when he first saw the fraud alert appear on his screen. The young employee remained beside the counter, relieved that she had finally spoken when she did. She knew that if she had allowed fear of challenging authority to keep her silent any longer, the mistake might have grown into something impossible to repair. The senior employee gave her a subtle nod of approval, silently acknowledging that professionalism sometimes required the courage to question even a supervisor when the evidence demanded it. Nearby, the security officer quietly stepped back toward his original position near the entrance. He had never needed to intervene, and now it was obvious that he never should have been placed in that position. Several customers resumed breathing normally, almost as though the entire lobby had been holding its breath together. The elderly veteran who had watched everything unfold slowly walked toward the waiting area without saying a word, but before sitting down, he offered the mother a respectful nod that carried more meaning than any speech could have. A young couple waiting for an appointment exchanged embarrassed glances, realizing how quickly they too had accepted the manager's accusation simply because it had been delivered with confidence and authority. The mother gently reached for the documents lying on the counter, carefully straightening each page without showing anger or satisfaction. Her hands remained steady, although the emotional weight of the past several minutes rested quietly behind her composed expression. Her son looked at her with growing admiration. He had witnessed strangers question her honesty without evidence, yet he had also watched her refuse to surrender her dignity in response. That lesson would remain with him far longer than the embarrassment of this morning. The manager finally spoke, but the certainty that had filled his voice earlier had disappeared completely. "I made an error," he admitted quietly, almost as though he was hearing the words for the first time himself. Saying them aloud forced him to confront something far more uncomfortable than a simple procedural mistake. He had allowed an alert on a computer screen to become a judgment against a human being before verifying the most basic facts. His authority had encouraged everyone around him to believe the accusation, and because he had spoken publicly, the humiliation had also become public. The mother met his eyes calmly. She did not interrupt him or attempt to embarrass him in return. She simply waited, allowing him to finish whatever he needed to say. The branch employees remained motionless, recognizing that the next few moments would determine whether this became merely an unfortunate mistake or the beginning of genuine accountability. Looking around the lobby, the manager saw faces that reflected disappointment more than anger. He realized that everyone present had witnessed not only his mistake, but also the consequences of making assumptions before seeking the truth. The polished floors, the bright promotional displays, and the carefully arranged customer service desks suddenly felt much less important than the trust that had quietly been damaged in front of an entire room of people. Standing only a few feet away, the mother continued holding her son's shoulder with quiet reassurance, reminding everyone watching that true strength is often revealed not by the power to accuse, but by the grace to remain composed while waiting for the truth to speak for itself. The manager lowered his eyes for a long moment before taking a slow breath that seemed heavier than any words he could have spoken. The branch remained unusually quiet, as though every person inside understood that the most important part of the morning was no longer the mistake itself, but what would happen next. He carefully moved the incorrect file aside and opened the customer's actual account on his computer, this time reading every detail with deliberate attention instead of rushing toward a conclusion. Everything matched the identification she had presented. Every deposit had been properly documented. Every transfer reflected years of careful financial planning. The college savings account showed a steady pattern of modest contributions made month after month, sometimes only a few dollars at a time, but never interrupted for long. Looking at the history, he realized he was not seeing suspicious activity. He was seeing discipline, sacrifice, and consistency. The mother remained quietly composed while her son watched every expression crossing the manager's face. The boy could not understand every financial document displayed on the monitor, but he could recognize the difference between certainty and regret. The confidence that had once filled the manager's posture had disappeared completely. In its place stood a man confronting the consequences of his own assumptions. The senior employee gently closed the incorrect folder and placed it several feet away from the counter, separating it from the mother's paperwork, as though correcting the physical mistake was one small step toward correcting everything else that had followed. The young employee quietly returned to her workstation, although she continued watching from a respectful distance. She knew she had done the right thing by speaking up, yet she also understood that the branch would remember this morning for reasons that reached far beyond an administrative error. A customer waiting near the entrance finally broke the silence with a quiet observation directed to no one in particular. "Sometimes people deserve questions," he said softly. "They do not deserve conclusions before the answers." No one argued with him. Several customers slowly nodded while continuing to wait patiently for their own appointments. The manager looked toward the mother again, this time seeing not an investigation but a family. He noticed the careful way she had organized every document inside her folder. Scholarship forms were clipped together. Savings statements had handwritten notes in the margins. Tuition estimates from several colleges had been highlighted with careful attention. Every page reflected planning that could only have come from years of determination. He imagined the countless evenings she must have spent balancing household expenses before deciding how much could be placed into that account each month. He realized that while he had viewed the account as a possible risk, she had viewed it as hope. The difference between those two perspectives weighed heavily on him. The mother finally spoke, her voice remaining calm despite everything that had happened. My son has been excited about today for weeks, she said. We came here believing this would be another step toward his future. She paused briefly before continuing. Instead, he learned how quickly people can question your character before they know your story. Her words were never raised above a normal conversation, yet they carried through the quiet lobby more powerfully than any accusation could have. The manager had no immediate response because he understood that every sentence she spoke was true. Her son looked down at the folder in his hands, then back at his mother. Instead of seeing embarrassment on her face, he saw remarkable steadiness. She had protected more than her own dignity that morning. She had protected his understanding of how to respond when treated unfairly. The manager slowly stepped away from the computer and stood directly in front of the counter without the distance authority had previously created between them. He folded his hands together, not out of habit, but because he no longer wished to hide behind procedures or policies. Looking around the lobby, he understood that every employee and every customer had witnessed the public accusation. If trust had been damaged publicly, restoring even a portion of it would also require openness. Sunlight continued streaming through the tall front windows, filling the polished lobby with a quiet warmth that contrasted sharply with the tension of only a few minutes earlier. In that peaceful silence, the branch no longer felt like a place where someone had almost been wrongly defined by suspicion. It had become a place where the truth had finally slowed everyone down long enough to remind them that every file represented a real person, every account represented a real family, and every decision made behind a counter could shape memories that lasted far beyond a single business day. The manager slowly lifted his head and looked directly at the mother, no longer as a customer standing across a counter, but as a parent who had trusted his branch with years of careful planning. His voice was noticeably quieter than before, yet every person in the lobby could still hear him because the room had become completely silent. "I owe you more than an apology," he said. "I failed to verify the facts before I questioned your integrity, and I did it in front of your son and everyone else in this branch. That should never have happened." The words settled over the room with unexpected weight because they were not offered as an excuse or wrapped inside policy. They were spoken as a simple acknowledgement of responsibility. The mother listened without interrupting. She could see that the confidence which had driven every earlier decision had been replaced by genuine reflection, but she also understood that apologies mattered most when they were followed by change. The manager turned briefly toward his employees. "I also owe all of you an apology," he continued. "Leadership means setting the standard, and today I demonstrated the wrong one. Procedures exist to protect people, not to replace careful judgment." The young employee who had questioned the identification numbers lowered her eyes for a moment, surprised that her manager had openly recognized what had happened. The senior employee gave her a quiet smile, proud that she had trusted the evidence instead of remaining silent. Around the lobby, customers began returning to their own conversations, although many still watched from the corners of their eyes. An elderly woman folded her completed deposit slip and softly whispered to her husband that she was glad someone had finally listened before the mistake became even worse. A father waiting with his teenage daughter placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, silently hoping she would remember that courage sometimes appeared in ordinary people willing to speak up when something felt wrong. The manager reached for the mother's paperwork with deliberate care and reviewed each page exactly as it should have been handled from the beginning. He verified every signature, confirmed every account detail, and processed the transaction without unnecessary delay. When he finished, he carefully slid the completed documents back across the counter instead of leaving them where they were. "Your college savings account is in excellent standing," he said. "Everything has been processed successfully." The mother accepted the papers with both hands and quietly placed them inside her folder. Her son looked at the completed documents and smiled for the first time since entering the branch. Relief washed across his face, but even more powerful was the pride he felt while looking at his mother. She had not allowed another person's assumptions to determine her response. She had answered disrespect with patience, uncertainty with honesty, and humiliation with quiet dignity. The manager hesitated before speaking again. "May I ask you one question?" he said. The mother nodded politely. "After everything that happened this morning, why did you remain so calm?" She looked toward her son before answering. "Because he was watching," she replied gently. He learns how to face the world by watching how I face it. If I allowed someone else's mistake to take away my dignity, then I would be teaching him that dignity depends on how other people treat you. It does not. It depends on how you choose to carry yourself when life becomes unfair. Her answer filled the lobby with another moment of thoughtful silence. Even customers who had only heard pieces of the conversation understood the truth contained in those few sentences. The manager slowly nodded, realizing that the greatest lesson taught that morning had not come from banking regulations, fraud detection systems, or years of management experience. It had come from the woman he had judged before taking the time to know her story. As the mother and her son turned toward the entrance, the security officer quietly stepped aside and held the door open with sincere respect. Several customers smiled warmly as they walked past, not out of sympathy, but out of admiration. Behind them, the manager remained standing beside the customer service counter, watching them leave while understanding that restoring trust would require much more than correcting one mistaken file. It would require changing the way he looked at every person who walked through those doors from that day forward. The mother paused beside the entrance before stepping outside, then turned back toward the manager with the same quiet composure that had carried her through the entire morning. She could have walked away without another word. She could have allowed the silence to become his burden alone. Instead, she recognized something changing inside the branch that might matter to people she would never meet. Looking at him calmly, she said, "I accept your apology, but I hope you understand that today was never only about me." The manager listened without speaking. "There will be another family that walks through these doors tomorrow," she continued. "Someone else will arrive wearing work clothes instead of business clothes. Someone else will be nervous because they have never opened an account before or because they are trying to protect what little they have managed to save. They deserve to be seen before they are judged." Every employee within hearing distance became completely still. The words were gentle, yet they reached deeper than criticism ever could. The manager slowly nodded. "You are right," he answered honestly. "I spent years believing experience made me faster at recognizing problems. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that experience should also make me slower to reach conclusions." The senior employee quietly smiled, recognizing that genuine leadership often began with the willingness to admit uncomfortable truths. The young employee looked around the lobby and realized that the atmosphere had changed completely from the tension that had filled the room less than an hour earlier. Customers were no longer whispering about an investigation. They were witnessing accountability. The manager asked the employees to pause their routine work for just a moment. Standing beside the customer service counter instead of behind it, he addressed the entire team. "Effective immediately," he said. "Every fraud alert will require 2 independent account verification steps before any customer is confronted publicly. If there is uncertainty, we verify first and speak second. We protect both security and dignity." No one questioned the decision. Several employees nodded immediately because the new procedure reflected something they had always believed but had never formally discussed. The security officer quietly thanked the manager for clarifying the policy, explaining that security staff preferred preventing unnecessary confrontations whenever possible. The manager agreed without hesitation. He understood now that protecting people included protecting innocent customers from avoidable embarrassment. The mother listened without any expression of victory. She had never come to the branch hoping to change policies or teach lessons. She had simply wanted to complete paperwork for her son's future. Yet she recognized that if today's mistake encouraged a better system, then perhaps some good could grow from an experience that had begun with so much pain. Her son looked toward the manager and then back at his mother. "Does this mean it will not happen again?" he asked quietly. The branch grew silent once more. His question was simple, but every adult understood how difficult the answer could be. The manager walked a few steps closer, careful to remain respectful. "I cannot promise that people will never make mistakes," he said. "But I can promise that I will work every day to make sure we do not repeat this one. That promise begins with me." The boy studied his face for a moment before giving a small nod. He seemed satisfied not because the answer was perfect, but because it sounded honest. The mother gently placed her hand on her son's shoulder again and smiled warmly. "That is all any of us can do," she said. "Learn, take responsibility, and choose to do better the next time." Those words settled naturally across the lobby. Several customers quietly smiled. while others returned to their business, carrying with them a lesson they had not expected to learn during a routine visit to the bank. As the mother and her son finally stepped through the front doors, bright afternoon sunlight reflected across the glass entrance behind them. The manager remained standing inside, watching them leave until they disappeared beyond the parking lot, fully aware that the most valuable thing gained that morning was not a completed transaction or a corrected file. It was the opportunity to become the kind of leader who understood that every person walking into the branch carried a story deserving of patience, fairness, and respect before any judgment was ever made. Several weeks passed, and the branch gradually settled back into its familiar rhythm, yet something inside the building had quietly changed. The new verification procedure became part of every employee's daily routine, and what had first been introduced after one difficult morning soon became a standard everyone appreciated. Fraud alerts were still treated seriously, but every account was verified carefully before a customer was ever confronted. Employees noticed that conversations became calmer, investigations became more accurate, and customers left feeling respected even when additional questions were necessary. The manager often thought about the mother and her son, not because he wanted to remember his mistake, but because he never wanted to repeat the lesson that had come with it. Each morning before the branch opened, he reminded himself that every person walking through the front doors carried responsibilities, hopes, and struggles that could never be understood from appearance alone. That simple reminder gradually influenced every decision he made. One bright afternoon, the familiar sound of the entrance door caught his attention. Looking up from his desk, he recognized the mother and her son returning to the branch. This time they entered with relaxed smiles instead of uncertainty. The manager immediately walked out from behind his office instead of waiting for them to approach his counter. He greeted them warmly by name, shook the mother's hand with sincere respect, and smiled at her son. There was no hesitation in his voice and no distance created by authority. They were welcomed as valued customers and as people whose trust mattered. The employees who had witnessed the earlier incident quietly noticed the difference. The young employee who had spoken up weeks earlier smiled to herself, realizing that one difficult decision to question a mismatch had helped shape a healthier workplace. The senior employee watched the interaction with quiet satisfaction, believing that true professionalism was measured not by never making mistakes, but by learning honestly from them. Even the security officer standing near the entrance greeted the family with genuine warmth, holding the door for another customer before returning a friendly nod to the mother. The appointment that afternoon was simple. The manager personally reviewed the latest statement for the college savings account, explained several scholarship planning resources available through the bank, and answered every question with patience. The son listened carefully while imagining the future his mother had spent so many years building one careful decision at a time. Before leaving, he looked at the manager and said, "Thank you for helping us today." The manager smiled gently. "Thank you for giving us another chance to earn your trust," he replied. The words were quiet, but every employee nearby understood their meaning. Trust was never guaranteed by a building, a title, or a policy. It was earned one respectful conversation at a time. As the family prepared to leave, the mother paused briefly near the entrance and looked back across the bright lobby. She saw employees helping customers with patience, answering questions without rushing, and treating each visitor with the same dignity they would expect for themselves. She smiled, not because the painful experience had disappeared, but because it had produced something meaningful. Her son noticed the smile and asked softly, "Are you happy?" She nodded. "I am hopeful," she answered. "There is a difference. Happiness comes and goes. Hope grows when people choose to become better." They stepped outside into the warm afternoon sunlight and walked toward their car together, talking about college visits, future classes, and ordinary family plans instead of what had happened weeks before. Inside the branch, the manager watched them leave only for a moment before turning back toward the customers waiting inside. Another person had just entered wearing worn work boots and carrying a folder filled with paperwork. Without making a single assumption, the manager walked forward with a welcoming smile and simply said, "Good afternoon. How may I help you today?" No one in the lobby knew the story that had changed him, and no one needed to. The lesson remained quietly alive in every careful question, every patient conversation, and every decision to seek the truth before reaching a conclusion. proving that genuine leadership is measured not by the authority to judge others, but by the humility to recognize their humanity first.